Hello, friends. Alex here again, speaking to you from the gallery and the studio at Flow. Um, and I'm sorry I've been away, but lots been going on, and I'm going to get right into it now because there's a lot to get through. Uh, so, first of all, I just want to note the sad passing of two titans of photography. And because I haven't really said much about it already, the death of Martin Parr was a huge shock to everybody. And although we all knew he'd been properly ill, that he'd been ill for some time, we didn't realise that the end was so had, was so close. And I just wanted to actually recount a story about Martin, who I knew a bit. I was not a close friend of his, but I did know him a bit, and we did cross paths. And there are two things I just wanted to talk about Martin briefly. One was that he was the only subscriber to every catalogue that I produced at the Flow Photographic Gallery. Indeed, the week before his death, he paid his latest bill for a couple of catalogues. I think it was the Camera Helps, the Paddy Summerfield catalogue for the Bodleian exhibition, and Blended Families. And he was a real supporter of the gallery, and he showed it in a practical way. He didn't just say nice things or just sort of give me sort of words of encouragement. He put his money where his mouth was and actually bought every single catalogue automatically. All I had to do was send them to him, and I would get paid in the same week. And that is, it's not a huge thing. It wasn't that he was investing or whatever, but it was a small thing that speaks a huge amount about somebody. And I think that what suddenly, when the news came out that he died, there was this a sort of moment of there was a sort of rupture between the way that we talked about him when we thought he'd be around forever, which was, with respect, but it was tempered with, there was some criticism, whether it was about photography or about the way that and I knew there were people resistant to him joining Magnum and all of these things, which suddenly became were put in perspective as minor niggles because he was a tower of British and world photography. I mean, and without him, suddenly we realised that there was nobody to replace him. There is no figure like Martin Parr who saw the need and the opportunity to create a foundation to support British photography, number one, but also was such a sort of tireless photographer himself, and a person who was much more likely to say yes to projects than many more minor figures than him, and I'm very grateful to him for the support that he gave me and the support and the inspiration he gave me through his work, particularly uh, the, um, the New Brighton, the 1980s, New Brighton work, which inspired me to become a photographer. And I've written about that in posts online, so I'm not going to go into that here. But his work was personally meant something to me personally, and I am very grateful to him for that, uh, and for shaping the way that my own career has gone. And the other person that we had to say goodbye to this week was Jean-Jaques Naudet, who many of you will know anyway, but he was the editor, the founding editor of LODP, L'Oeil de la Photographie, or the Eye of Photography, which was is a newsletter that comes out daily and is delivered to hundreds of thousands of people around the world, with news of exhibitions, events, festivals, and so on. And it comes out 365 days a year, and it's beautifully curated. And Jean-Jacques, who again, it was quite a shock. I mean, he wasn't hugely young, but he wasn't very old either by today's standards. And I don't know if he'd been ill before. I mean, I simply don't know. But again, I'd been dealing with him very shortly, not long ago, when he was running an article on blended families, which we've got on right now, Judith Black and Deanna Dykeman's exhibition, which we've got on now. And so I think he again was somebody who saw the need for, possibly he saw the need for a figure like himself to take the reins, to take charge, and without that kind of personality, and it's the same with Martin. Without that sort of bigness of spirit that allowed him to imagine this project, the Eye of Photography, and what it would mean to people, photographers, galleries, institutions, and so on around the world. You wouldn't get these sort of great projects. And Jean-Jacques was hugely supportive, very communicative. I mean, like Martin, it's another just an interesting observation is that if I ever wrote to Martin or Jean-Jacques, they wrote back immediately. And I think and I try to do that when people write to me. And I hate it, when I don't, because through indecision or, you feel like you haven't got time to write back. But somehow these two people always communicated back within I mean, I would say honestly, within an hour of you writing an email, you could pretty much depend on receiving a reply. And not that I expect you would expect it, or particularly needed the reply that quickly, but that was their habit, and I think that is the habit of seriously energetic, engaged people, is to maintain a sort of flow of conversation in a timely way. Anyway, it's a very sad time for that, and I'll just finish on this one by saying that by noting that that Martin that the story I was going to tell you about Martin when I visited him last April as I was planning the exhibition, Paddy Summerfield's exhibition, The Camera Helps at the Bodleian, and I made some designs for for the hanging. For the installation, and I want because Martin had been a big supporter of Paddy's, I wanted to sort of show Martin the plans, and so I went down to Bristol in April, I think, last year, with a sort of a 3D mock-up that I'd made of how the exhibition would be arranged, and I went down on the. It was a beautiful sunny sort of spring day, and I went down on the train to Bristol, and I expected to be there for about an hour. And Martin met me at the foundation, and I was a bit nervous because, as I say, I don't know him that well, although I've met him a few times, and he has also got a reputation for for being quite not suffering fools and so on. So I was happy with what I planned for Paddy's exhibition, but it mattered to me that Martin liked it too, and and I was happy to take comments from him. Anyway, we sat down and I showed him, and Martin was very complimentary about it, liked it, and so on. And then, much to my surprise, he said, "Right, let's look around. Let me show you around. What would you like to see in the archive?" And so we spent, I don't know, an hour and a half in the archive looking at amazing things like Richard, the original maquettes of Richard Billingham's Razor Laugh, and the original imprints from that, and just beautifully, and just so kindly and carefully brought out by Martin. And then, even more to my amazement, he invited me to stay for lunch, and they have in the studio. They introduced me to everybody in the studio, and it's really like a family, and my heart goes out to them all because they worked like it was just the most happy place. And there's a big kitchen table there, and Martin and I had toasted cheese sandwiches and soup, which he brought in, and we had the most. I had the most delightful time. We chatted about everything, even the future and maybe working together and so on. And it was genuinely an extraordinary day. And I left Bristol that afternoon, sort of on cloud nine. I mean, he'd really shown me a good time, and I'll be forever grateful to him for that. And sadly, the Camera Helps, which he opened, he gave the opening address to, was the last exhibition that he opened for anybody, and nobody knew it at the time. So so he was going till the end, and anyway, thank you, Martin, and thank you, Jean-Jacques Valet. Okay, let's go. Let's move on. Okay, just to remind you that Blended Families is still on. Okay, and it's going to be on for a bit because I've got a new exhibition coming up in which I'm not announcing yet because there's so much work to do. It'll be the most complex exhibition I've ever attempted here, and but this is still fresh, and we've had considerable press attention for this from the FT, from Josh Lustig at the FT. Thank you, Josh. We've had it from Jean-Jacques, and best wishes to Gilles Decamps, who's taking over at LODP now. And so they ran a piece just a week ago or so on blended families. And then thank you to Peter Dench, amateur photographer, who just this week published a review. So it's definitely one to see. It's free. It's in central London. Text me, email me, or whatever, and come and have a look, and you can see the catalog. And the catalog is fantastic. The exhibition is free, but the catalog isn't. But the catalog is worth every penny. The exhibition consists of 120 images made by Deanna and Judith, where they both exchanged images from their own personal archives, which continue all of the way around the gallery in a continuous line where each image reflects something, whether it's tone, whether it's form, whether it's an emotion from the image before it. It starts with Judith, and then it goes to Deanna and Judith and Deanna and so on. And each of them have 60 images respectively in the exhibition. I don't think it's ever been done before. We're hoping to take it to other places, particularly in the States. And now's your chance to see it. So let me know. And in the catalogue, you get, well, let me just tell you what you get in the catalogue. You get an essay by me, which I took quite a long time to write. Amazingly, you get a family tree. When have you ever seen a family tree by two living photographers? And then you get all 120 photographs as they're displayed in the sequence that they're displayed. You get a conversation between Judith and Deanna, which is about the project and how they work together. And there's a last little gift in the catalogue, which I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you'll see when you get a copy. It's just another little thing to put in, which I like to include because we don't see behind the scenes enough, I think, in the work of photographers. Okay, I'm going to. So it's open now, and I'm going to move on anyway. The real purpose of today was to talk about four exhibitions that I've seen recently, and that I think are noteworthy and worth viewing, worth seeing if you haven't already seen them. They are okay. Well, I'm going to start with two at the Gagosian. They are Richard Avedon in the American West and Nan Golden Ballad of Sexual Dependency, both at Gagosian, but they're two separate locations. Avedon is at the Grosvenor Hill, the mega location. I mean, it's a fantastic two white cubes joined together in a sort of L shape. And then the smaller gallery on Davis Street, both in Mayfair, which is housing all of the Nangolden's ballad prints. And I'll come to ballad second. I'm going to talk about in the American West first. And I made some notes when I was there. I mean, first of all, I'd like to sort of just say how astounded I was by this exhibition. I'd obviously seen, like everybody has seen, portraits in the book on screen, but I'd never seen the actual prints before. And these prints are, I mean, the images are stunning. And there aren't that many of them in the show. That's another thing worth mentioning. It's a show. I don't think there's more than 20 photographs in the show, and I think this is a real bonus for the viewer because you don't get that kind of fatigue that you get when you see mega shows where there's lots to see, and you feel like an obligation to give them all attention. This show, I thought was. I mean, I'll read a note that I made, and this is verbatim, so forgive any sort of grammatical errors. But there's a note I made afterwards. I said, "This is the work of a master. For all the criticism of Avedon, he was able to mold the world to his vision, and still that vision is timeless and universal. I believe that this is where photography achieves the greatness of other art forms, when the photographer has mastered the medium and matches the mastery with the liberation of their own volition." And I'll explain that last phrase. What I mean is that Avedon was a master of photography, and that involves a sort of technical ability. He wasn't like Alex Soth in the sense that he did not just travel around and make personal connections with people. He curated, as it were, these people. I mean, he made 1,000. There were 1,000 sittings over a 4-year period, and just a little bit of background on the exhibition. The photographs were carried out between 1979 and 1984. They were a commission by the Amon Carter Museum in Fort Worth, Texas, and he spent. He was at the height of his powers at the time. He was the hottest photographer in America, and he traveled. And with this commission, he traveled to 21 states, as I said, making about 1,000 portraits, and he. And apparently, I think in the original edition there were 100. That 1,000 came down to about 126 finished portraits, which were editioned. He says of his own work, all the portraits are accurate, but none of them tell the truth. And this is what I mean. This is what I mean about mastery. He has his mastery of the medium liberated himself from the technical aspects of the medium and released his own volition, his own instinct. And I think that this is really worth noting in an age where mastery, well, digital, first of all, he's shooting 10:8, and that comes with its own technical, I suppose, challenges and so on. And you need to have a certain, you need to have a certain technical mastery. But in order to carry out work of this nature, you need to forget the medium. Okay, he's chosen to do 10:8 black and white, that and put everything on a white background and so on. It was as if he was between the camera and the sitter, and he was not behind the camera. It's as if he had forgotten the camera, and that his only connection now was with the image and the images that he was making of the sitter. And as you say, they don't represent the truth. He's not trying to tell you that this is true. What he's trying to do is communicate a kind of, allow a sort of humanity to be communicated within the image. And he was able to do this because he was an artist. And I think that I don't want to sort of use this as a sort of counterpoint or a criticism for how we teach photography now or what we expect of photography. But we have always assumed that if you want to be a painter or a sculptor or a writer or something, that you at least have to master the medium. And I think that there is something really interesting that it is actually in the mastery of the medium that liberation happens. This is where the real work happens, and and if we ignore the medium, or mastering the medium, we are enslaved to it. But once you've got to Avedon's level of of what, well, I mean, talent is I suppose a latent thing, but his prowess, let's say, and you marry that with a critical and deeply thinking mind with a encyclopedic knowledge of photography and art, plus an artistic instinct entirely of his own shape and making, you get the work of this kind. And it was fantastic, and it was just a fantastic experience for me, because I'd never seen them at scale, and it was really a wonderful moment for me personally to witness them. I went early, and so there weren't many people there. I would another note I made, and this was about the sitters, not about Avedon as such, was to say that there is something in the eyes of the subject that says, yes, we are broken, but I believe it is worth it. We are part of a very big experiment. This is our condition. And I think that that idea of the American dream, I mean, the American West is a dream within a dream. It's it's a state of mind, and the America is a state of mind. It's not like the UK or Italy or France or whatever, which has a historical reason to call itself a country with defined borders. I mean, okay, Italy's, and you could argue that not all borders are defined, but the point is we have centuries of history which go into making up who we are, as do the French. They have a language, as do the Italians, the Spanish, and so on. But the Americans don't. They live on a dream, and they live on an Enlightenment idea about democracy, about opportunity, about paths to happiness, to and and to equality, and so on. And of course, it has not been on the right side of some of equality, in a big, in almost the biggest way. But its progress has always been enlightened, and I think that the people in the sitters in these portraits knew that they were part. I don't think they knew. Perhaps they didn't know it in a conscious way, but they understood there was a contract between, and the contract was work hard, and your life will be worthwhile. And I just wonder whether that contract still exists, whether it's still intact right now. And I think that this was a portrait of a nation during the Cold War, when America was dominant. America was a beacon of hope to the rest of the world, where America believed in democracy, believed in creating democracy and spreading democracy, where it was possible, and believed in the values of the American dream. Now, whatever you think of, whether you're a capitalist or a socialist or whatever, this dream was the dream of the working man and woman, and it gave a sort of reason for life, and a reason to have children, and a reason to keep going, and a reason to immigrate there, and emigrate, and a reason to find sanctuary there, and so on. So I think that this was a really, really timely exhibition, and I highly recommend that you see it. So, and then over to the Nangolden ballad. Now, they've got, I would say, 12 by 16 prints. The whole thing is made, is the whole exhibition, floor to ceiling, is racked with every single picture in sequence from the ballad. Nangolden's work, photographs were made between 1973 and 1986. They were of her friends and well, there's one of her parents in there, but so I don't know how much is of her family, but they were of her friends, and you don't need me to tell you how much impact these photographs have had on photography, and since, and there have been many pretenders and very few successfully so. They She rewrote or she created a genre, which was the sort of snapshot the sort of snapshot approach to photography, but where she didn't just use it for the happy time, she used it for all time, and she photographed everything from herself having been beaten up by a boyfriend to her, to friends dying, and it was and it helps, of course, that there's a great deal of time. Incidentally, it's the 40th anniversary by some calculations of both those, both the In the American West and the Ballad of Sexual Dependency. So this is that's why these shows are on at the moment, and they show two sides of America that in a very useful way. Nan Goldin's pictures show a, a sort of bohemian marginal community living in New York at a time when New York was bankrupt, where there was a great deal of freedom in New York as a result, and a great deal of poverty, and that people gravitated artists and people who didn't feel comfortable in the mainstream, let's say, either from a point of view of sexuality or art or whatever, escaped to New York and found a common, found a sort of new family there, and Nan Goldin photographed what was around her, and there was an honesty to it, and she's given birth to a genre of photography, which is, I think, in some ways has misunderstood what she was doing, because Nan Goldin wasn't a photographic slouch. She wasn't just she, yes. I just saying hello to somebody as they're walking past past the studio. Yeah, she knew what she was doing. She used the flash. She was using slide film, and in fact, the original showings, and you can still see it. It does tour. The original display of her work was via slideshow, and actually, I think that's how it should be. I think the book is fantastic. I love the book. The I think that this exhibition is not as compelling as either the book or the slideshow, because it doesn't have the sort of drama. I don't think this work is suited to a sort of typology or a very tight arrangement. It's kind of too overwhelming. It is beautifully printed, I will say, and the prints were made. They're pigment prints made last year. It's just it doesn't have the weight of the slideshow or the book somehow, and I'm still thinking about why that is, but I think mainly it's because the work is represented in a sort of linear form, which makes it hard to see one image alone. And I think that's really important for this work, is the time you spend alone with a single image. So I'm afraid that's my take on that showing of the ballad. But it's still worth seeing completely, and please go and see both. I think the ballad is on until it comes off on March the 21st. So you've got plenty of time to see that. And Richard Avedon, it's called Facing West, the exhibition, is on until the 14th of March. So you've got time to see both if you haven't already. And then on to another couple of exhibitions that I think are worth mentioning. We got so I then went up to Photographers Gallery to see the Boris Mikhailov Ukrainian Diary, which I hadn't realized I'd actually seen already when it was at the MEP in Paris a couple of years ago. And this exhibition is a pared down version of that. It's a because the TPG doesn't have the space that obviously the MEP has, and so I had I've had that sort of feeling where I saw a selection of Boris Mikhailov's prints that I think the Tate acquired when they did a photograph on the an exhibition on the Snapshot, which was years ago, and that was the first time I ever saw his work. And they're just little end prints, like little 5x7s, mini lab prints. And so it's kind of, they sort of got me. And then, but there was something sort of about the sort of craziness of his work and the playfulness of his work, which didn't really appeal to me in general. And I have to say that this exhibition has completely and utterly changed my view. Even having seen it at the MEP, I think the MEP show was so huge, and it was so busy when I went to see it. I mean, it was during Paris Photo, and there were just, hundreds and hundreds of people there to see it. And I think I just didn't register it properly, and it didn't really sort of stick with me. But seeing it at the TPG, I think they pulled the really useful sort of bones out of his work, and that's not to downplay his other his other any of the projects which aren't any of the series which aren't there. He is a seriously individual. He's a serious individual voice in photography, who grew up in Ukraine. Pretty much all the work is from Ukraine, and and there's a brilliant film that they're showing, which is a Louisiana Channel film of Boris Mikhailov talking about his work, and I really recommend that you watch that. And I'll try and put a link in the notes here about that. Now, I think that there's a slideshow which I just love called Yesterday's Sandwich, which I'd never seen before, set to Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And it's about 10 minutes long, and it's totally captivating. And what I love about what he does is that he's a first principle photographer artist. He's not referencing, he knows, he understands the world that he's coming from. I mean, in terms of the culture that he's coming from, but he just does things that please him. And so he sepia tones prints, for example, which to me, if you, just even as a conceptual thing, I sort of, my skin crawls. I sort of repel when I think of sepia toning to make something look nostalgic. But when he does it, and the way that he talks about it, it makes complete sense. And I feel like a fool for having sort of rejected it outright. He tones color. He tones his pictures of the aftermath of war blue, because he says that blue is the color of war, and it's strange, but it's true when he says it. It's absolutely it's brilliant. So there's in all the in the flagrancy of the work, there is this extraordinary, consistent, serious voice, and I thoroughly recommend you seeing that. And there's a great catalogue that goes along with it. And then my sort of coup de coeur, something I wasn't expecting, was this Zofia Ridet exhibition, which is on I suppose the second floor. I think Boris Mikhailov's on two of the floors. Then you've got the automat passport photo exhibition, and then I think the floor below that you've got Zofia Ridet, and it's just a one-roomer. Zofia Ridet was a photographer who, at the age of 67, I mean, the exhibition was called Sociological Record, and at the age of 67, in 1978, she just decided to start photographing in people's homes, and she lived in Poland, and she continued, so she would just knock with her she'd turn up with her camera and knock on somebody's front door and charm her way in, and so the whole exhibition is it's called a sociological record, and it's because it's about how people live, and it's just a fascinating, brilliantly curated show by Claire Graphic, who I'm proud to call a friend, and who we collaborated with me on the exhibition of the pictures from the garden, which the Photographers Gallery ran in Oxford a couple of years ago. But Claire has done the most amazing job of staging this, and it's quite sort of claustrophobic. It's a little claustrophobic, the exhibition, and that suits the photography really well. And there's just it's the sort of thing that I would love well, I guess in some way I am sort of slightly engaged in a similar thing, but in a quite a different way here in Kensal Green. But I thought it's an absolutely brilliant exhibition, and I thoroughly recommend you see that. That is on until the 22nd of February, and the Boris Mikhailov is on until the 22nd of February. So you got a bit of time to see those too. They are. I'm just going to see. Look at my. I mean, they. Um, here's. Anyway, I think that London has got a lot going on at the moment. There's no doubt lots of other stuff that I'm not aware of or have seen, or and I would be very grateful to you if you put in the comments below so that everybody can benefit from it. Any suggestions you have for other exhibitions that maybe that are worth seeing, or events. It would be good to have them here so that we can all get learn about them and get to go and see them. I'm going to finish with a a talking about this book by Robert Adams, the photographer of the Western of America's West. Uh, he's one of the new topographics photographers, one of my favorite photographers of all time. He one of Robert Adams' talents is his ability to write and communicate about photography and art in general. And and this book, Art Can Help, I was given by Sophie, my wife, for Christmas, and I didn't know it existed. I've got other books uh, of uh, of Robert Adams' writing. I just didn't have this one, and this book is about him writing about individual pictures that he's found meaning in, and why what they mean to him. And the essays are culled from other writings that he's, contributions to magazines and publications over time. So it's a sort of an anthology. But I just wanted to highlight one picture, and then it's by Ken Abbott, and and the title is A Golf Course Under Construction East of Boulder, Colorado, 1989. And it's a stunning picture. And when I saw it first, I thought it was a constable. It's not, but it's a beautiful. It's a 10:8 landscape, and it's so funny because as I'm talking, people are walking past, and I look strange holding up a book to a screen. But it's and this is an example of why I think Robert Adams is such a great writer. And I'm going to read this article to you. It's very short. This little piece, this little essay, um, just to finish off, and so on. Because wilderness is gone, Those of us who might have loved it are compelled to review whatever else we can reach that might sustain the spirit. Ken Abbott has sometimes looked along the fringe of suburbanization, down dirt roads soon to be paved, past farmland left fallow in anticipation of development. As here, in a place so delicately beautiful that we can hardly bear to believe that it is about to become a golf course, with all that this change will bring of artificial fertilizers and herbicides and the consumption of irreplaceable water. Ken's day job, when I got to know him, was as chief photographer for the University of Colorado at Boulder. He is an accomplished portraitist and enjoyed the work, but during his time off, he chose to picture landscapes, especially places that some would have seen as impure, but that he clearly believed were still in a sense pristine. He often visited them in the spring and early summer when they looked their green best. I urged him to bring these pictures together in a book to encourage us, but he never quite wanted to, I think out of the same modesty that allowed him to respond to the places without prejudice. Leo Rubinfian once encouraged me by writing that I had, as a photographer, laid form lightly on life. A compliment I do not always deserve, but one I think Ken deserves with photographs like this. Form in a picture is justified by our experience of wholeness, and in brackets coherence, in life. And if we are to be convincingly reminded by art of such experience, then the shape in art has to be believably tentative, as fragile as meaning seems to be in life, as problematic even as the future is for those cottonwood shoots there on the far side of the creek. Anyway, thank you. And till next time, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.